Lebanon in support of the South Lebanon Army until May 2000. 1983 Israel bank stock crisis. The bank stock crisis was a financial crisis that occurred in Israel in 1983, during which the stocks of the largest banks in Israel collapsed. In previous episodes of share price weakness, the banks bought back their own stocks, creating the appearance of constant demand for the stock, and artificially supporting their values. By October 1983, the banks no longer had the capital to buy back shares and to support the prices, causing share prices to collapse. The Tel Aviv Stock Exchange closed for 18 days beginning October 6, 1983, 79. The immediate consequences of the crisis were the loss of a third of the public's investments in the banks, the acquisition of the banks by the government at a total cost of $6.9 billion. For reference, Israel's entire GDP in 1983 was about $27 billion, and the nationalization of the major banks, Leumi, Harpolim Hamizrachi, Discount, and Clay, executives of each of the banks were convicted of criminal charges. Raphael Recanati of Discount Bank and Mordechai Einhorn of Bank Leumi were both sentenced to 8-month prison terms. 80. Recanati's sentence was suspended on appeal when one of 5 charges was quashed. 81. As part of the settlement, the controlling interest in Discount Bank, as well as the other banks, was ceded to the government. 81. The mid-1980s. Anatoly Sharansky meeting then Prime Minister Shimon Peres after his release from the Soviet Union in September 1983. Begin resigned and was succeeded by Yitzhak Shamir as Prime Minister. The 1984 election was inconclusive, and led to a power-sharing agreement between Shimon Peres of the Alignment, 44 seats, and Shamir of Likud, 41 seats. Peres was Prime Minister from 1984 to 1986 and Shamir from 1986 to 1988. In 1984, continual discrimination against Sephardi ultra-Orthodox Jews by the Ashkenazi ultra-Orthodox establishment led political activist Aryeh Deri to leave the Agudat Israel party and join former Chief Rabbi Ovadia Yosef in forming Shas, a new party aimed at the non-Ashkenazi ultra-Orthodox vote. The party won 4 seats in the first election it contested and over the next 20 years was the third largest party in the Knesset. Shas established a nationwide network of free Sephardi Orthodox schools. In 1984, during a severe famine in Ethiopia, 8,000 Ethiopian Jews were secretly transported to Israel. By July 1985, Israel's inflation, buttressed by complex index linking of salaries, had reached 480% per annum and was the highest in the world. Peres introduced emergency control of prices and cut government expenditures, successfully bringing inflation under control. The currency, known as the Old Israeli Shekel, was replaced and renamed the Israeli New Shekel at a rate of 1,000 old shkelim equals 1 new shekel. In October 1985, Israel responded to a Palestinian terrorist attack in Cyprus by bombing the PLO headquarters in Tunis. In 1986, Natan Sharansky, a famous Russian human rights activist and Zionist refusenik, denied an exit visa, was released from the Gulag in return for 2 Soviet spies. South Lebanon conflict. In June 1985, Israel partially withdrew from Lebanon, leaving a residual Israeli force and an Israeli-supported militia in southern Lebanon as a security zone and buffer against attacks on its northern territory. The partial withdrawal did not end the conflict, however, but drew the IDF back into a conflict in South Lebanon with the Shia organization Hezbollah, which became a growing threat to Israel. 82. From 1985 to 2000, the protracted armed conflict saw fighting between the Christian-dominated South Lebanon Army, SLA, and Hezbollah-led Muslim guerrillas within the Israeli-occupied security zone. 83, 84, With no clear endgame in Lebanon, the Israeli military was unfamiliar with the type of warfare that Hezbollah waged, and while it could inflict losses on Hezbollah, there was no long-term strategy. With Hezbollah increasingly targeting the Galilee with rockets, the official purpose of the Security Zone 2 montage of Israeli troops in southern Lebanon protect Israel's northern communities seemed contradictory. Hezbollah also excelled at psychological warfare, often recording their attacks on Israeli troops. 85. Following the 1997 Israeli helicopter disaster, the Israeli public began to seriously question whether the military occupation of southern Lebanon was worth maintaining. The Four Mothers movement rose to the forefront of public discourse, and played a leading role in swaying the public in favor of a complete withdrawal, which would be completed in 2000. 86. First Intifada. Israeli soldiers and protesters in Gaza during the Intifada. Growing Israeli settlement and continuing occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip led to the 1987 First Intifada. 87, 88. Motivated by collective Palestinian frustration over Israel's military occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip as it approached a 20-year mark. 89. The Intifada began on the 9th of December 1987, 90, when an Israeli Defense Forces (IDF) truck collided with a civilian car in the Jabalia refugee camp, killing 4 Palestinian workers. 91. Palestinians charged that the collision was a deliberate reprisal killing. 92. While Israel denied that the crash, which came at time of heightened tensions, was intentional or coordinated. 93. The Palestinian response was characterized by protests, civil disobedience, and violence. 94, 95. There was graffiti barricading. 96, 97, and widespread throwing of stones and Molotov cocktails at the IDF and its infrastructure within the West Bank and Gaza Strip. These contrasted with civil efforts including general strikes, boycotts of Israeli civil administration institutions in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, an economic boycott consisting of refusal to work in Israeli settlements on Israeli products, refusal to pay taxes and refusal to drive Palestinian cars with Israeli licenses. Israel deployed some 80,000 soldiers in response. Israeli countermeasures, which initially included the use of live rounds frequently in cases of riots, were criticized as disproportionate. The IDF's rules of engagement were also criticized as too liberally employing lethal force. 98. Israel argued that violence from Palestinians necessitated a forceful response. In the first 13 months, 332 Palestinians and 12 Israelis were killed. 99, 100. Images of soldiers beating adolescents with clubs then led to the adoption of firing semi-lethal plastic bullets. 99. In the Intifada's first year, Israeli security forces killed 311 Palestinians, of which 53 were under the age of 17. 99. Over 6 years the IDF killed an estimated 1,162 1,204 101 Palestinians. Among Israelis, 100 civilians and 60 IDF personnel were killed. 102, often by militants outside the control of the Intifada SUNLU, 103, and more than 1,400 Israeli civilians and 1,700 soldiers were injured. 104. Intra-Palestinian violence was also a prominent feature of the Intifada, with widespread executions of an estimated 822 Palestinians killed as alleged Israeli collaborators. 1988 April 1994. 105. At the time Israel reportedly obtained information from some 18,000 Palestinians who had been compromised. 106. Although fewer than half had any proven contact with the Israeli authorities. 107. human rights abuses by Israeli troops led a group of Israelis to form B'Tselem, an organization devoted to improving awareness and compliance with human rights requirements in Israel. The period of sustained protests and violent riots carried out by Palestinians in the Palestinian territories and Israel would last until the Madrid Conference of 1991, though some date its conclusion to 1993 and the signing of the Oslo Accords. 87, late 1980s to early 2000s. Late 1980s. In September 1988, Israel launched a Nufik reconnaissance satellite into orbit, using a Shavit rocket, thus becoming one of only 8 countries possessing a capacity to independently launch satellites into space. 2 more have since developed this ability. The alignment and Likud remained neck and neck in the 1988 elections, 39 hours 40 minutes seats. Shamir successfully formed a national unity coalition with the Labour alignment. In March 1990, alignment leader Shimon Peres engineered a defeat of the government in a non-confidence vote and then tried to form a new government. He failed and Shamir became prime minister at head of a right-wing coalition. Gulf War. Aftermath of a Scud missile attack in Ramat Gan in August 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, triggering the Gulf War between Iraq and a large allied force, led by the United States. Iraq attacked Israel with 39 Scud missiles. Israel did not retaliate at request of the US, fearing that if Israel responded against Iraq, other Arab nations might desert the allied coalition. Israel provided gas masks for both the Palestinian population and Israeli citizens, while Netherlands and the United States deployed Patriot defense batteries in Israel as protection against the Scuds. In May 1991, during a 36-hour period, 15,000 Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jews, were secretly airlifted to Israel. The coalition's victory in the Gulf War opened new possibilities for regional peace, and in October 1991 the US President, George H.W. Bush, and Soviet Union Premier Mikhail Gorbachev, jointly convened a historic meeting in Madrid of Israeli, Lebanese, Jordanian, Syrian and Palestinian leaders. Shamir opposed the idea but agreed in return for loan guarantees to help with absorption of immigrants from the former Soviet Union. His participation in the conference led to the collapse of his right-wing coalition. Soviet authorities finally permitted free emigration of Soviet Jews to Israel. Prior to this, Jews trying to leave the USSR faced persecution. Those who succeeded arrived as refugees. Over the next few years, some 1 million Soviet citizens migrated to Israel. Although there was concern that some of the new immigrants had only a very tenuous connection to Judaism, and many were accompanied by non-Jewish relatives, this massive wave of migration slowly transformed Israel, bringing large numbers of highly educated Soviet Jews and creating a powerful Russian culture in Israel. 108, Oslo Accords. In the 1992 elections, the Labour Party, led by Yitzhak Rabin, won a significant victory, 44 seats, promising to pursue peace while promoting Rabin as a tough general and pledging not to deal with the PLO in any way. The left Zionist party Meretz won 12 seats, and the Arab and Communist parties a further 5, meaning that parties supporting a peace treaty had a full, albeit small, majority in the Knesset. Later that year, the Israeli electoral system was changed to allow for direct election of the prime minister. It was hoped this would reduce the power of small parties to extract concessions in return for coalition agreements. The new system had the opposite effect. Voters could split their vote for prime minister from their interest-based party vote, and as a result larger parties won fewer votes and smaller parties becoming more attractive to voters. It thus increased the power of the smaller parties. By the 2006 election the system was abandoned. Yitzhak Rabin, Bill Clinton, and Yasser Arafat during the Oslo Accords signing ceremony at the White House on the 13th of September 1993. On the 25th of July 1993, Israel carried out a week-long military operation in Lebanon to attack Hezbollah positions. On the 13th of September 1993, Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, signed the Oslo Accords, a declaration of principles, 109, on the south lawn of the White House.